Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning to those else, well, west of us. So that was an excellent talk from Maxine there. And I think what's important is to realize that how did we get there? So I'm going to talk about our learnings from ProCo, which really informed some of the simultaneous developments that went on, and then where Halo study took us. We're going to be talking about subperception spinal cord stimulation, and a few people realize that it actually started with an advanced bionics device with the blue sky thinking of Tom Yearwood. And then we learnt about 10 kilohertz stimulation from Caporal in an unblinded study. And then we showed in ProCo that we could get patients to respond to subperception spinal cord frequency. So I think we conclude that it is possible to achieve pain relief with subperception programming. The learnings from ProCo RCT was that we could get equivalent outcomes no matter what the frequency between 1 and 10 kilohertz. We also learnt that this was very precise on the targeting. We only had a bipole with an 8mm separation, so we had to test a number of sites in order to get the best pain relief. And as Maxime said, this seems to be the most common sites for this was over the back of T9 and T910. And the other learning was that even though we were achieving the same pain relief at 1 kilohertz, it was at a third less energy usage. So as we dropped down the frequency, we did make adjustments to the pulse width, and we increased the pulse width. But the order of magnitude going from 10,000 down to 1,000 is an order of magnitude of 10. And the order of magnitude for pulse width is a doubling or a trebling. And this is the explanation for why the charge required to achieve the same pain relief was a third less for those on 1 kilohertz compared to those on 10. And here are the graphs that really explain that. But we still had this one problem of this target variability, and that's where the Halo study comes in. So here we wanted to explore the high and the low frequency options for subperception pain relief, which I did with my colleague, Dr. Paz in Madrid. So does the rule of neural dosing hold true below 1 kilohertz? How low can we go before we lose pain relief? Is there a clinical difference in subperception pain relief from 1000 to 10 hertz? Can we improve the sweet spot search by targeting in subperception SCS with a novel field shape designed to preferentially engage the dorsal horn? And this is what Maxime was talking about with the development of the contour calibrated, targeted, broad field shape. So this was a 30-patient case series of implanted patients who we looked at the pain relief achieved between 1,600, 400, 200, 150, and 10 hertz. Outcomes were collected retrospectively by site personnel, research nurses in our case. All patients were implanted with a dual 16 device, and the sweet spot search with the contour field shape was done at 1,000 hertz with the knowledge base that we had learned from ProCo. We used the titrating algorithm, and we kind of predicted going forward what would be the likely range of pulse widths that we would require as we dropped from 1,000 hertz down to 10 hertz. So the outcomes were we had patients who had dominant back pain, but scoring quite severely at 8.2, and at 1,000 hertz we were able to achieve pain scores of 3.1. And as we drop down the frequency range, you start to see that the pain relief is maintained in subperception all the way down the scale. And that was the same for overall pain and for leg pain scores. So we used the neural dosing, and here we have it drawn out for you with the standard deviation, meaning that not every patient would have responded the same at each frequency. So there is inter-patient variation and intra-patient variation. But when you multiply and get the charge per second and relate that to frequency, you can see how more efficient the device comes for both recharge interval and for duration of a prime device. And if you remember, we're achieving the same pain relief, and it's possible to get energy usage and therefore charge per second for a monthly charging cycle. So the journey we went on, if we put these two things together from 10,000 hertz down to just 10 hertz, is from these two studies alone. And if we can look at the pulse width versus frequency, and then the frequency charge relationship with these two studies combined, you can see that there's a compelling curve that works out in real life at something similar to what we had predicted. We live in an era of multiple waveforms. There are multiple manufacturers explaining why their particular waveform is better than everybody else's. But what I would put to you is, what do they actually have in common? What must they have in common? And I think it's the neural dosing. And so if we look holistically in terms of charge delivery, we can see from Adnan Al-Kaisi's early studies using Medtronic devices, where he showed in his particular study that that better pain relief was associated with a high frequency. We can see that he was well outside the neural dosing curve, something I pointed out to them at the time when I first presented Proco. If we look at the Sunburst trial done by Deere, we all know that the outcomes were less than mind-bogglingly satisfying. But when Vesper looked at a subgroup where the fixed output was reduced by amplitude, we found that the best outcomes were achieved smack bang in the middle of our neural dosing curve. And when you look at the work from the Sensor group, you see that their charge delivery is right bang in the middle of our neural dosing curve, but at 10 kilohertz only. And just for reference, there's paresthesia, which may be slightly different, but at least it is in line with our curve. Although, so together, we think this is really is what neural dosing is all about. And I find this a very unifying concept for our field, and I hope you do too. So there is, we've shown that there is effective subperception pain relief extended to lower frequencies provided with using proper targeting and dosing. The derived parameter relationships enable effective therapy to any frequency. You're not confined to just one. Energy deliveries and therefore charging are reduced at lower frequencies. If your patient can get as good pain relief at a lower energy system, why not use that? Some known waveforms are confined to just a single point on that neural dose curve, and there will be inter and intra patient variation, which will mean they're more likely to fall out of pain relief if those parameters can't be changed in addition to amplitude. So I think when we think of neural dosing, we think of the settings, electrical settings of amplitude, frequency, and pulse width. But to make this stool a little bit more stable, I think targeting is also the fourth leg of this. So thank you very much for listening, and I'll stand ready for questions in due course.